2 of the Silver Sword, Journey Through the Air. I've really enjoyed looking at Chapter 1 responses. A couple of little notes I want you to take care of or think about when you're doing Chapter 2. First thing, please don't make a copy of my set of slides with the student text and the questions on it. Create your own slide. If you want an example of how that looks, have a look at our class blog. I've put some on there. So they're very good examples of the sort of things that you need to be looking at or the type of presentation I'd like you to do. Secondly, think about the detail that you're adding in your answers. We're after full sentence answers. Okay, sentences don't start with because. We want full sentences with lots of detail. Don't forget to add some examples from the text to back up what you're saying in your answers. Apart from that, let's listen to Chapter 2. Now, when we left, Joseph, he had just escaped from the prison of Zachna in South Poland as he was taken capture by the Nazis for putting a picture of Hitler to the wall in his classroom. So let's see what happens to Joseph in this chapter. Chapter 2, Journey Through the Air. The village of Zachna was a mile below the camp. It was a mass of tiny huts clinging to the steep cliffside. There was no moon that night, but Joseph could see the lights in the windows. He walked straight through the village. Suddenly he was challenged in German. "Karl, give me the cigarettes," said a rough voice. He took no notice. "Karl, the cigarettes!" the voice shouted threateningly. He hurried on. There were footsteps behind him. He turned around to look. A drunken soldier was trottering after him. Joseph began to run. The soldier ran too, swearing wherever he stumbled. Just below the last huts in the village, the road curled away from the cliff edge. A mail car had pulled up. Her lights were on and the engine was running. There was a pile of luggage in the road and an angry group of people had gathered round. "You're 2 hours late," someone cried. "I told you, there was an avalanche. The road was blocked," returned the driver. Joseph dived behind a white wall of snow that the snow plough had thrown up on the side of the road. He was right on the edge of the cliff, which dropped steeply into the darkness. He heard the sound of crates being dumped onto the road. He heard the drunken soldier roll up and cry, "Driver, you've pinched my cigarettes!" "Chuck 'em over the cliff," said someone. A scuffle, laughter. Steps coming towards him. Joseph slid quietly away to where the square shape jutted out from the road. In the dark, it looked like a cart without wheels. Quickly he hid underneath. At once he wished he hadn't moved. A heavy crate banged down on the boards above his head. The boards quivered and shook. Boots scraped the wood, shuffled on the snow. There was a babble of voices. Jokes and leg pulling mixed with directions for the load of crates. Joseph waited tensely while the crates were lifted in the tarpaulin and draped over him. When the soldiers were back on the road, he heaved himself over the wooden edge and under the tarpaulin. A loud voice shouted, "Are you there?" From the other side of the dark valley came an answering call. Suddenly Joseph realized the wooden boards that he lay on were moving. They were sliding out into the darkness, away from the road. Where was he? As soon as he dared, he lifted the edge of the tarpaulin and looked out. It was a kind of roofless cage. It was hung by pulleys and wired to overhead cable and was swinging giddily from side to side. An aerial luggage lift. These were quite common in the mountains. They were driven by electricity and used for carrying goods from one side of the steep valley to the other. Joseph sighed with relief. The giddy movement of the cage made him feel sick. but he knew that every second it was taking him further from his enemies. Then suddenly, the cage squealed to a standstill. It began to slide back to the road. The voices grew louder. A jerk, a rattle of pulleys, the scrape of wood on the snow, and he was back where he had started. Someone leapt into the cage and lifted the tarpaulin on the other side of the crates from Joseph. "There's room for it alongside. Hurry up!" cried the same voice. Joseph's hand was in the revolver holster. He meant to fight his way out if he had to, but all he could feel in his holster was a stick of chocolate. Another crate was chucked in and kicked alongside the other pair. It banged against his foot and nearly made him scream in pain, though he fell back and bit his lip, groaning. But no one heard his groans, for the cage was already rattling out into the darkness. While he rubbed his bruised toes, it pitched and swung from side to side. After a few minutes of climbing, a shape loomed down towards him and rattled past. It was a balance lift. The descending cage was balanced the weight of the climbing one, and it meant he had passed the halfway mark. Ahead of him was the black shape of the mountain. With every swing of the cage and every creak of the cable, it came nearer. Were there soldiers on that side too? If so, what was he to do? He could not escape discovery, and he was quite unarmed. In a flash, he made up his mind. He lifted the tarpaulin from his shoulders and sat with his back to the crates, facing the dark mountain. Okay, the questions for this chapter. Why did Joseph climb into the lift? What was the lift used for? What shock did Joseph get when he put his hand on the revolver holster? How did Joseph know he was past the halfway mark? What problem did Joseph anticipate he may have when he reached the other side? And lastly, and I want you to put a good effort into this one, write a prediction about what could happen when Joseph reaches the other side in the next chapter. Okay, don't forget, we're really looking for some really detailed full sentence answers with examples from the story to back up what you've said. Also, when you've finished Chapter 2's work, please reshare your work with me. That way I'll know you're ready for something else to mark. Don't forget, if you're not quite sure, check out our class blog. There's a link on our timetable, and that will give you an idea of some of the things that other kids from our class have done. In the comments section, you might be able to say what you like about their work on the blog, and maybe even add some hints and tips for them to improve their own work. Okay, I really look forward to seeing your work tomorrow, or today. Thank you. Have a great day. Be safe.